Hi everybody, welcome to this video all about Henrik Ibsen's play A Doll's House. I'm going to be focusing on Act 1 in this video, and the video is aimed mainly at students that are studying the text as part of their A-level in English literature. If you have watched any of my videos before, you will probably notice that I'm a big fan of breaking things down into particular chunks in order to understand things and see how everything kind of fits together in order to create the text. So what I'm going to be doing in this video is using a familiar diagram that I've used in lots of other videos on my channel, which is the plotline graph, which I use to help students see the chronology of a particular chapter or the chronology of a particular act of a play. So I'm going to be doing this in this video. So what's going to happen as this video progresses is you're going to see a long line of events which make up the chronology or the plot, so to speak, of Act 1. And then the video will finish with me going through some significant other things such as language, such as context, and so on. So the play begins with Nora arriving home from Christmas shopping, and Halma is in his study working. And when he comes out of that study, because he's concerned perhaps about how much she has spent, they discuss saving and spending, and it materializes that he's a saver and she's a spender. Dr. Rank and Mrs. Linde arrive, Mrs. Kristin Lind. Sometimes I say Lind, sometimes I hear Linde, whatever, it's the same character. And they arrive, and Dr. Rank goes into Halma's study to have a conversation with him, and Mrs. Lind and Nora stay outside in the main room, of course, and they discuss Nora's family, her financial situation, the fact that last year they had to scrimp because Halma was looking for a job, and now he has got a good job. They can have a Christmas which is a bit more luxurious, and it materializes that Mrs. Lind wants a job at Halma's bank because she needs to earn some money, and as a widow, she can afford to do certain roles that married women maybe could not do. And Nora promises to ask Halma for a job at the bank. A little bit later in that conversation, the conversation becomes a little bit sour because Nora is called a child by Mrs. Lind, meaning that Mrs. Lind believes that Nora knows nothing about the world because she's lived this sheltered life as a housewife in the family home. And as a way to assert her independence and her capabilities, despite being a married mother, she admits that she has taken a loan out in secret, and that loan was taken out to save her husband's life by going on holiday to a warmer climate in Italy. So not only does Mrs. Lind learn about Nora's secret loan, but also, of course, the audience does because we're listening in to this conversation. So we are forced as an audience to reassess Nora's depiction as this kind of childlike housewife. She actually maybe has more complexity than we initially thought. At that moment, Krogstad, the antagonist of the novel, arrives to see Halma, and Nora is a little bit suspicious of him because of obviously it was he that she took the loan from. And at that moment, Dr. Rank comes out of the office and into the main room, and they have a conversation between Mrs. Lind and Nora. Dr. Rank being kind of the family friend. Um, when Krogstad leaves, Halma does comply and he does allow Mrs. Lind to have a job at the bank. However, it's not as simple as that because in order for Halma to hire Mrs. Lind, it means that Krogstad will need to be sacked, and that has dangerous consequences, as we know, for the marriage of Nora and Halma, because Krogstad does not want to be sacked. And that is what precipitates the blackmail that we see a little bit later in this act. All the characters leave, and that's important in terms of exits and staging because it allows the audience to see the only example in the play of Nora playing with her children. And it seems to be that Nora is actually a very good mother. She takes time, she seems to be interested in them, she plays hide and seek with them. But that happiness and that carefree play is cut short because Krogstad secretly enters through the back door, and Krogstad immediately changes the tone to one of playfulness to one of kind of sinister seriousness. In that conversation that Nora and Krogstad has, the audience learns that Nora has taken the loan out from him, but in so doing, in order to get the money, she had to forge her father's signature on the contract or the IOU. So it means that Nora has committed forgery and therefore is likely to be found guilty of fraud. Of course, ironically, Krogstad has done something similar in the past, so he is kind of can't persecute Nora too much because it would be hypocritical. So he's also committed an act of forgery in the past as well, and he's now looking to reclaim his respectability, which means he must keep the job at the bank. But Krogstad knows and is suspicious, of course, that Mrs. Lind might get his job at the bank, and therefore Krogstad is at risk, and therefore he's asking Nora to make sure Torvald, her husband, doesn't terminate his employment. Of course, Halmer has already made that decision. So Nora has now got to try and persuade, if not manipulate, her husband to keep Mrs. Lind employed, but also keep Krogstad employed. And from this, we have the blackmail, which is if I lose my job at the bank, Nora, you're coming down with me. So there's a sinister blackmail there. The act finishes with Halmer lecturing Nora about morality and honesty. And of course, I've already done a video about the analysis of that section at the end. Very heavy in dramatic irony, because Halmer is unaware that by criticising his own wife's, so by criticising Krogstad's behaviour, he's also unknowingly criticising Nora's behaviour, because essentially they've done the same thing. And Halmer, in his role as a lawyer, occupying a role of credibility in terms of morality and honesty, says that if parents invite their children to lie and breathe in a home that has an atmosphere of deception and kind of decay, it means that the children are also going to grow up crooked as well. And that's why from this point onwards, Nora says, in that case, I can no longer spend any time with the children, because if they're spending time with me, it means that their morality is slowly being eroded. So she safeguards her children by not spending any more time with them for the rest of the play. So that is the trajectory or the chronology of Act 1. Just to finish this tutorial off with some other significant things in these coloured boxes around the outside. I'm not going to go through all of these because I've either made a video about them before, or I think they're fairly self-explanatory. But from the very get-go, when the curtain rises, and even before the characters enter the stage, we can see that this is a middle-class home, which is a realistic location. And that reminds us that Ibsen has chosen to have naturalism in this play. This is not something that the audience cannot relate to. This is a setting that would be very relatable to all the audience. Of course, this play is set at Christmas, the festival of the home, and therefore that has connotations of togetherness and family, which of course in this play becomes less and less likely as the play develops. We have the macaroons, which is symbolic of Nora's rebellion as well. The blackmail builds tension and the kind of the ticking down of time to the ultimate conclusion and resolution of the play. And of course, as the act develops, Nora's language moves from being a woman who is playing a role of this kind of housewife to her language being much more empowered and mature. And that also links, of course, to the end when she does speak in this very adult, mature way. having shed her childlike persona that she had at the beginning. We've also got the lots of zoomorphism where Nora is called things like squirrels and little birds, suggesting that she is oppressed in this household, and that we have this reminder that in this play, Ibsen is challenging this idea that men occupy the world of business and finance, and the women occupy the world of the home and the family. So it's really kind of conflating those two separate spheres of existence depending on your sex and your role in this marriage. Finally, Mrs. Lynde is the confidant character because it's through her that we learn of Nora's secrets. And as we move into Act 2, Mrs. Linde does seem to try and help Nora by trying to get Krogstad to get the letter back that he posts where he admits Nora's wrongdoing. So Mrs. Lynde is, in terms of a stock character, maybe the confidant character. So that hopefully is useful in the analysis of Act 1. I'll be doing 2 other videos for Act 2 and Act 3 following the same structure. Thank you very much for watching and good luck in your studies.